What is up, everybody? Welcome into episode 12 of I'll Say This with Chris Castellani. I'm your host, Chris Castellani. Before we really get into the meat of what I want to talk about, I do want to mention the final segment of Monday's show was a very emotional segment talking about my experiences on the autism spectrum. First of all, thank you for the responses. Some of them I was not able to read. I was able to get a few sentences in. I'm emotional enough as it is, so I appreciate all of them. I really do. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to get all weepy and I deal with that enough. But I appreciate your kindness. I'm really split on the segment as a whole. And I'll be entirely honest with you. I've been split with all of my content this week. I think I'm like an athlete with that, where athletes, like baseball players, sometimes just have bad weeks where they just aren't hitting. I don't think I've hit this week. My show on Monday was fine. And this is for the record. I don't want anyone to get this twisted. The people that I'm working with are doing an unbelievable job. Producer Matt is absolutely killing it. I was on Money Shots. Megan and Kelly were awesome and incredibly kind. The Bonanza Boys, the live stream, they were all great. I don't know. I think I've just been off my game. I'm sure I'm being way too critical of myself, and that is often the case. But beyond all of that, thank you for the reception. It was very meaningful, and I do plan on, at some point, opening up and talking more about stuff like that, because I think it's important. Let's move on now to what I really want to talk about today, which is actual sports-related stuff, and we're going to start with the Tigers. The Tigers are currently 5-7. On the season. By the time you're watching this, they will be on the verge of starting a series, 3-game set over the weekend against a Colorado Rockies team that has been playing some pretty good baseball this year and legitimately has a good offense. I mean, I said this, I can't remember on what show. No, I said this on Money Shots, where they're starting to remind me of those early 2010s Rockies teams where I'm not sure about their pitching. We know how hard it is to win in Colorado with those pitching staffs and that altitude, but they got some hitters. They got a good offense, and the Tigers are going to have their work cut out for them. They've gotten a lot of innings out of the bullpen. I don't want to talk a ton about the Yankees series. I'll say this. I thought they played some sloppy baseball. I thought offensively they were not very good. I thought the pitching staff was remarkable. Even with the mistakes they made, I thought the pitching staff was great. And Fetter, once again, continues to be a wizard when it comes to that stuff, but they lost 2 out of 3. I felt like they should have won 2 out of 3. They were competitive in all 3 games, which does give me hope. It does inspire confidence that the deeper the season goes, the more games they play against teams like that. I still believe, and I could be way off, like Jonathan Scope is 0 for his last 25 right now. He's going to break out at some point, right? Meaning that eventually they're going to start winning some of those games. And I do think, quite frankly, what I said on Monday's show has proven true through the last 3 games, which is I have confidence, regardless of who takes the mound, that this team will be able to remain competitive in games with their pitching. They have played 12 games so far. They have been competitive in 11 of them. They had one huge blow-up in the 3rd game of the season against the White Sox. Other than that, they've been competitive in every game, and a big reason for that is that this pitching staff just continues to hold down the fort, and I think that's phenomenal. It's something I said preseason, and it's something I'll continue to say. I have a lot of faith in the manager. I have a lot of faith in the pitching coach, and regardless of who's on the mound, I have a lot of faith in the pitching staff. But the big story here, obviously, is the fact that you have Miguel Cabrera in pursuit of hit number 3,000. He's currently at 2,999, 1 hit away from a legendary milestone. Of course, he's already in the Hall of Fame. He's already a first ballot Hall of Famer, but you get 3,000 hits, you're guaranteed you're in. I mean, it's one of the great accomplishments that any hitter can accomplish in all of sports. And quite frankly, what makes it more amazing is the fact that we're not going to see it for a long time. I was looking at active players who are approaching that threshold. There aren't any. After Miggy, there's Robinson Cano. He's not getting to 3,000. He's like 39, and he keeps getting suspended for PEDs. After that, I mean, we live in the age where strikeouts, home runs, and walks are as prevalent as they've ever been. It's going to be a long time before anybody else gets there. At some point, and I really want to choose my words carefully here because I've been a prick lately. I have been. I'm probably going to be a jag-off on this show too. So the last thing I want to do is ruin anybody's fun. At some point, I believe that it will be very fair to have a conversation about Miguel Cabrera's legacy. Now, I love Miggy. Miggy is a legendary figure in Detroit. He's a legendary figure for the Tigers. He has brought me an immeasurable amount of joy as a fan, and for that, I'm eternally grateful, and I will always love him for that. At the same time, there's also some well-documented evidence of some character flaws. Now, does it prevent me from cheering for him? No, because I'm going to cheer for every person who wears a Tigers uniform. That's just how I exist. And maybe that makes me a fanboy, a slappy, a cheerleader, whatever. At some point, that conversation will be had. I think it will be a better conversation to have when he announces his retirement, to really put together his whole legacy. Right now, it's cool to see people at the park. I guess, personally, I know that there's a bit of a phoniness to it. Now, I know the fans are excited. That's not phony. But I also know that the second this happens, the second Miggy gets hit number 3,000, the park's going to go back to being 30% full. The team is maybe going to go back to being competitive, but half their core is injured, and, Hinch and Federer are doing all they can. They're fighting. It's not, like they're not trying the way that I felt, in past regimes. Everyone's working their butt off, but there is something about this whole pursuit that does ring a little bit hollow. Now, I acknowledge completely, before anyone brings the torches and pitchforks out, I am in the 1% of 1% of people who are complaining about this. And it's not really a complaint. That's just how I roll, all right? I'm a vibe killer, right? Shit. That's just how I am. I think it's great. I'll be at the ballpark on Friday and Saturday. If Miggy gets hit number 3,000, I'm going to clap, and there's going to be people crying. I do not agree with the whole thing that if he gets to hit 3,000, they're going to do a ceremony in the middle of the game. I think that's a bit silly. I love him as a player. I love that this is a huge moment for a team and a fan base that has not had a lot to cheer about again, but it's almost like a tease to me, because I want this to last all season. I want to have a 2006 type of resurgence. I just don't want to have a little like, oh, hey, Miggy chased 500 and people came to the park again. Hey, Miggy chased 3,000 and people came to the park again. I want long-term success because it's been too long. So, I don't know. I'm rambling. This is probably a terrible segment, but it's something I wanted to make known, because the last thing I want to do is ruin people's fun, but I am not staying up at nights thinking about this the way that some other people are. And if you are, good on you, man. I'm not going to be that person who's going to tell somebody not to be happy or excited about something, all right? You find your own happiness, and I think that's great. And I say that with zero condescension or ill will. I guess, I don't know, maybe I need to meditate or something. I just feel like I should be enjoying this run more, and yet all I can think about is the fact that, yeah, they haven't made the playoffs in 8 years. I'd rather have that right now than a guy who's chasing a personal milestone. I don't know. I'm probably contradicting myself, because Miggy getting hits and driving in runs, that leads to, Tiger wins, and that's what I want. So I don't know. This segment should end. I'm going to cut it down significantly because it sucks. But I do want to talk about a funny thing that happened in yesterday's game. With the Tigers up 1-0 in the bottom of the 8th, they had runners on second and third. First base was open. Miguel Cabrera came up. He was 0-for-3 with 2 strikeouts at the time. And Aaron Boone decided to intentionally walk. Miguel Cabrera, obviously with the rule that's been in place for several years, no pitches had to be thrown. Miguel Cabrera walked right to first base. Now it ended up working out. Austin Meadows had what was a bloop double. 2 runs scored, 2 huge insurance runs to put the Tigers up 3-0. Gregory Soto shut it down in the top of the 9th inning, and Tiger fans were mad. I'm very split on this, because if there was no evidence strategically to support the fact that Miguel Cabrera shouldn't have been walked there, then I'd be frustrated by it. I remember, it's ironic that the Yankees were involved in this as well. When Derek Jeter had his walk-off single in his final at-bat at Yankee Stadium in 2014, there were people saying, why didn't Buck Showalter just walk him? Well, no, because Derek Jeter that year had like a 600 OPS or something. To walk him would have just been acknowledging that you didn't want to see him get a walk-off in his final game. Strategically, it didn't make any sense. In fairness to Boone, from a strategic standpoint, that move did make sense. It was a smart move, because you had a lefty on the mound. Austin Meadows on deck does not hit lefties very well. And baseball's cruel, buddy boy, because they got everything they wanted. Meadows hit the ball 10 miles per hour off the bat. Bloop single that just found a spot in that very spacious outfield grass in center field at Comerica Park, and 2 runs scored. I get fans' frustration there. Come on. How can you not be upset in the moment? You want to see history. So what? Even if it doesn't make sense, you want to see it. So I'm not blaming any fan for booing or being upset. There were reports. People took their kids out of school. They played hooky, didn't go to work just to see Miguel Cabrera potentially get number 3,000 on Thursday, and you see him walking to first base for an intentional walk. I get it, but I also understand that from a baseball standpoint, there is sound logic behind that move. Also, though, I mean, it was in the back of Boone's head. Had to be. And there's nothing wrong with that, dude. I'm sorry, man. And maybe it's just the competition in me. If I'm an opposing manager, I am doing everything I can to make sure that that guy on the other end doesn't make history against my team. Is that selfish? Of course it is. Is it petty? Of course it is. Baseball's the pettiest sport in the world. Guy gets hit in the foot. The next inning, a guy gets a fastball to the ribs. You had an instance earlier this week in which Tommy Pham literally threatened to fight an opposing player at a gym. All right, that's how baseball works. So to me, it's a funny moment that actually enhances this chase. I think it is neat. I think it's part of the legacy. It actually brings a smile to my face, but I completely acknowledge fans' frustration. I mean, it's a punk move, but it's a punk move that I weirdly kind of appreciate. All right, we're going to move on from the Tigers for a little bit, and I do want to talk, this will be a short segment, but I want to talk about the Lions because a take arose, it bubbled up to the surface this week, and I believe it was a certain radio show that started it, and then I saw it all over Twitter, which is the idea that the Lions will be making a mistake if they play it safe with the number 2 pick in the draft. And the reason I'm keeping this short is I'm not draft guy, okay? I'm not knocking people who do this, but I don't obsessively follow all these players. I don't watch their combines. To be honest, outside of Big Ten football and some of the national TV games, I don't watch like a ton of college football. I watch a fair amount. I probably watch more than the regular person, but I'm not a scout. I'm not somebody who's watching these guys religiously week in and week out and studying their highlight tapes. So I'm not going to sit here and act like I know who the best player available is for the Lions. But the fact that in year 2 of a rebuild, and buddy, I get it, okay? Being a Lions fan is the most unfun thing in the history of unfun things. At the same time, the whole, I'm not comfortable with them playing it safe. I want them to reach for the stars and hit a home run. Are you out of your mind? That's all the Lions have done for like 2 decades is reach, swing for the fences. How'd that work out with Charles Rogers? How'd that work out with Eric Ebron? How'd that work out with so many bad first-round draft picks that they had? I've talked about this many times on this program. I think last year's draft was one of the best they ever had because for the first time in a while, they didn't go with the sexy pick. They didn't go with the high ceiling, low floor. They went with Penei Sewell, who was, quite frankly, a revelation. He was great at 2 different positions on the offensive line a year ago. It's just that whole I want you to go bigger. I want to get my guy. You sound like a 16-year-old girl who wants a Ferrari for her birthday. There's nothing wrong with playing it safe. If this was year 3 of the rebuild or year 4 and this team was 3-4 pieces away from really being like Super Bowl caliber, I'd say, dude, shoot. Go, shoot for the moon, baby. To the moon. Right? Go out and get your quarterback. But right now, I feel like if they take Thibodeau with the 2nd pick, there's going to be people who are like, I don't like it because it's safe. What's wrong with safe? It's the 2nd pick in the draft in year 2 of a rebuild. They were 3-14 last year. Safe is the smart move at this point. And I trust Brad Holmes. I'm not huge on Malik Willis. And I'll explain. Screw it. I'll explain why. This segment will go longer than I expected it to. But I think Malik Willis is an insane talent. But one, I think this quarterback class sucks. This is the worst quarterback class I've seen maybe ever. I guess the one QB class, I think it was the one with Jake Locker and Blaine Gabbert. That one was really bad. Now, I have a fear, because this has happened in bad QB classes, where you're so desperate to find the next franchise quarterback that you kind of just pull one out of obscurity. Like, I do remember that class when they were like, oh, man, Jake Locker's the guy. And I remember watching him, in college and being like, this guy's a dog. He's going to get his ass broken in the NFL, and that's exactly what happened. He was a complete bust. Now, I think Malik Willis is a substantially more talented quarterback than either one of the guys I just named. Go ahead and draft Malik Willis. You know what you're going to have? You're going to have Matt Stafford 2.0, which is an exceptional quarterback, an amazing talent, and not a complete team around him. And you're going to end up wasting 12 years on Malik Willis, and in 2034, he's going to get traded to another team and win a Super Bowl in year 1. I think you need to build the team around the quarterback first, then get the quarterback. But even if it's beyond Malik Willis, I've heard players that are listed 30th on draft boards that people want the Lions to draft at number 2. Like, what are you talking about? And I understand it. If there's any organization in sports that should be second, third, and fourth guessed, it's the Detroit Lions. That's fair. But I also think, going back to what I said earlier, last year's draft was a prime example of the draft I hope they have this year. Safe, convenient, high floor guys that are as reliable as hell, that can start from day one. That's what you got with Sewell. That's what you got with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it worked out pretty well. Everyone wants to accelerate the rebuild. Of course. Especially with the Lions, who were never really building to anything and yet decided to hit the reset button after doing nothing. At least the Tigers rebuilt after what was like a pretty prosperous era. I know they didn't win a World Series, but like the Lions, I know it's tough to say, hey, we're rebuilding when we haven't won a playoff game in like 30 years. I understand that. But I do think when it comes to this current regime, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, staying the course is the way to go. I think you potentially run the risk of, pushing this rebuild back a few years if you really roll the dice with that number 2 pick. So the whole idea of don't play it safe is nonsense to me. And for the record, and I know how this works, right? I will never be somebody who is going to hope that a draft pick fails because it would validate my opinion. Those people do exist. They're weird people. Like, I would rather have this guy who plays for my team fail because it would make me look correct than me be wrong and have him succeed. As skeptical as I am about certain picks in this draft, whoever the Lions take at number 2 deserves a fair shot. You can be critical of the pick, but they deserve a fair shot, and I hope desperately that they succeed and do great things for Detroit. I really do. So as skeptical as I am about certain players in this draft, no matter who the Lions get with the second pick, I hope they succeed. I'm just a little baffled by where this take came from of like the Lions can't play it safe. Why? Moving on to the last segment here. I feel like this is going to be a rage-filled episode, so I guess this is a perfect conclusion to this show. Producer Matt, who runs the Barstool Detroit Twitter account, put the question out there. He asked, who are the 5 people that Detroit sports fans hate the most? And he got a ton of answers back, and we ended up with a top 25 list. I'm not going to read off everybody, but in the top 5, rounding out the top 5, you have Jim Joyce at number 5, Patrick Waugh at number 4, Sidney Crosby at number 3, number 2, you have Aaron Rodgers, and at number 1, you have Claude Lemieux. Now, some of these guys, in fairness, were either before my time or a part of sports that I don't know a ton about. I don't really know a ton about Claude Lemieux. I mean, I know he tortured the Wings, and I know the same about guys like Patrick Waugh, but when I look at this list, and I get people's frustrations. I'm not going to knock anyone for hating Sidney Crosby or hating Aaron Rodgers. But let's use Rodgers here as an example. He's number 2 on this list, and he's the most recent of the top 5. When I think about Aaron Rodgers' biggest crime is just that he's really good at football. And I get it. He doesn't like his family, and I'm not getting political. I know he ruffled a lot of feathers and pissed a lot of people off with the whole vaccine thing last year. I understand all of that. I also know Lions fans would take that guy as their quarterback and take the career he's had, playoff blunders and all, would take every single second of his career, replicate it if it meant that he would come to Detroit. And that's not meant to be a knock or criticism of Detroit. I mean, everyone would take Aaron Rodgers. He's one of the top 3 most talented quarterbacks of all time, and I'm probably lowballing it by saying top 3. If you want to hate Aaron Rodgers or Sidney Crosby, Claude Lemieux, David Ortiz, any one of those guys, I get it. I mean, these guys broke your heart. Ortiz is one that's like on the edge where he did amazing things for baseball. I know he got busted for PEDs one time. It was steroid era. I don't even, whatever. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I can accept it. But I still get angry at the sight of him because of 2013 and that grand slam. But when I think of the biggest offenders, the biggest villains to Detroit sports, the ones that I have the biggest problem with are the ones who worked from within. And that's why if I'm making a list of the people who have tortured Detroit sports fans the most, number 1 with a bullet is the Ford family. I just used Aaron Rodgers as an example, and Aaron Rodgers has murdered the Lions. Now, Aaron Rodgers has murdered a lot of teams. It's not like he's some fluke quarterback who's just good against Detroit. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, like I just said. But when it's all said and done, how many years will Aaron Rodgers have played in the NFL and been a starter? Like 18? That is less than a third of the time in which the Fords have owned the Detroit Lions. We are talking about a family that for nearly 60 years has butchered, destroyed, and mutilated professional football in the state of Michigan. To me, they're the biggest villains in Detroit sports history. Like, they have to be number one. And it's what's amazing to me, it's not like it's just been one person. Like Shad Khan, the guy who owns the Jaguars, he's just one buffoon. We're talking about William Clay Ford to Martha Ford to Sheila Ford Hamp. It's the same lineage, different people, but the exact same results. You almost have to try to go this long and win a single playoff game. I mean, that is astonishing. And there's just always been I don't know, negligence might not be the right word, but a level of buffoonery, a lack of self-awareness. That's what I'm looking for when it comes to the Fords, that we've never really gotten the acknowledgement that things aren't going well, or that things have never gone well. Mike Ilitch, he was imperfect, but Mike Ilitch, at least with the Tigers, after 2003, came out and said, you know what, this is awful. This is unacceptable, and this is going to change. And yet we have gone 6 decades now, and nothing, maybe it will one day, but nothing's really changed. And that's why I truly, I get upset when people are like, you shouldn't boo Sheila Ford Hamp because she's not responsible for the sins of her father. You sure as hell can boo her. That is a nonsense take. She is a part of the same lineage that is responsible for 60 years of organizational malpractice. I'd clone my ass and boo her twice if I could. Stop with that. They're number one. They, to me, are number one in terms of people that should be the most hated in terms of, Detroit sports fandom. Personally, though, there's one person on this list, and they're low on this list of the top 25, that all this time later, I still get angry at the sight of them. And I thought time would pass, because in September, it'll be 5 years since Detroit let this guy go. And yet, I still get angry at the sight of Brad Ausmus. I don't think it's petty. I think I have a legitimate reason for it. I guess when you look at people who've managed the Tigers over the last, in the 2000s, right? Starting with Leland, right? Jim Leland, again, imperfect. You could even argue, I don't really agree with this, but you could argue he lost him a few playoff series there near the end of his tenure. Not an analytically minded guy, overused some pitchers, underused his pitchers, did not manage the bullpen very well near the end. I get that. But Jim Leland was responsible for creating a winning culture. Jim Leland's players loved playing for him, and Jim Leland did win a lot of games. And he had experience. He would be prickly with the media. That's who he was, but at least, he knew how to play the game. Ron Gardenhire was given garbage rosters, and despite the fact that his teams were awful, I think he had a pretty darn high approval rating. Good dude, been around a long time, friendly with the media, had to answer questions after some horrifying games. I mean, and having some horrifying teams. I think for the most part, Detroit sports fans respect the character that he brought to Detroit. And obviously you have A.J. Hinch, who's the best of both worlds. An analytically minded guy, sharp guy, competitive as hell, good at creating a culture, players like him. I mean, in my opinion, he's still the best manager in baseball. And then you had Brad Ausmus, whose teams played a horrible brand of baseball. Now, look, sometimes teams have off days, right? Or off weeks. Like this week, the Tigers did not play good fundamental baseball. I know they won the last game against the Yankees, but they made some terrible errors. The pitching was fine, but they had some bad at-bats. But for the most part, A.J. Hinch's teams suffer from the problem that Gardenhire's teams suffered from, which is they're just not that talented. Now they've gotten better, and they've probably won more games than they've had any right to over the last year plus now, but I respect what A.J.'s done. Brad Ausmus was given gold. Brad Ausmus was given a team with 5 Cy Young winners on it. He was given a team with a 2-time MVP, multiple All-Stars, mismanaged the absolute hell out of a playoff series in 2014, leading to them getting swept by an inferior Baltimore Orioles team. You had a last-place team in 2015 when he should have gotten fired. You lose out on the playoffs by, I think, 2 games in 2016. One of those games was a game in which he forgot that he had a closer on the roster, and the team that they lost to was the Blue Jays, who ended up beating them in the wild card race that year. And then 2017, they had the worst team in baseball, and finally, you mercifully let him go. And beyond all of that, well, I don't think he's a bad guy. I've gone beyond that. I don't think he's a bad person. I just think he's a gentleman who is completely ill-equipped to manage a baseball team, and he's shown that on multiple occasions now. No one did less with more than Brad Ausmus did. And he was snippy with the media when they would ask him good questions. Dan Dickerson told a story that he was kind of a jerk to him. That one still bothers me. And I don't hate him as a person. I don't really hate anybody as a person. If I met him, I'd shake his hand. But I would tell him, I don't think you did a very good job here. He's, I believe, 20th on this list. He would be top 5 on mine. He's behind a lot of guys who I understand why they're ahead of him. Matt Millen in the top 10. If this was 5-10 years ago, I feel like Matt Millen might have been number 1. People have maybe softened on him a little bit. But yeah, so I would say, from a consensus standpoint, I believe the Fords belong at number 1. Personally, the one that gets in my head the most is still Ausmus. Because other guys like David Ortiz broke our hearts in 2013, but what do you want David Ortiz to do? Not swing at a first pitch changeup? Ground out? Guys, getting paid to win and succeed. Like, he's going to swing the bat and try to drive in runs. Whereas you had a guy in Ausmus who just underachieved at every turn. This has been a really angry show. I didn't mean to do it. This is like a little bit of old Castellani coming out here. I don't mean for that. But I'm gonna settle down. We're gonna get this podcast uploaded, and we're gonna enjoy the weekend. I appreciate all of you listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much. I know I've been a little bit bitter today, but I appreciate all the kind words you people have said, and all the positive feedback, and even the negative feedback. I appreciate the fact that people are paying attention to what I do. I love where I'm at professionally right now, and the audience is a big reason for that. So you can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. While you're at it, if you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Spotify, on any one of the podcasting platforms that you prefer. So that'll do it. I'll be right back here on Monday with another show. Thank you very much for watching and or listening, everybody. Have a great weekend. Peace and happiness.